That Perlin, the developer of original noise, was once awarded that Cinema Academy Award, like Oscar, just for those mod function which was used everywhere in Hollywood.
And he didn't patent it, which is kind of nice.
I would also, in fact, I love to compare those functions, procedural noises, to kind of I don't know, golden ratio or ancient canons for like Greek architecture or so, which was used more or less, well, whatever you want to construct, to build, to paint. If you use those like ratios, your painting or your whatever would be like harmonic one. So I do believe that some noise functions here play exactly the same role than computer graphics, in fact. That you can create landscapes, or you can just paint some nice patterns or whatever. If you like properly use proper functions, you may be more or less ensured that it would look cool and behave properly.
So the workshop today is kind of broken into two parts. The first part is basically just kind of the concepts or types of noise and some ideas of how to work with it. And the second part is more about like some actual use cases. So yeah, I mean we'll jump in a sec into a patch and have a look at something. But just in general, there's kind of some properties of noise that make it highly desirable for computer graphics. You know, when we're making graphics on the computer, at some point it's quite like a finite medium. You know, you have a certain allocation of ones and zeros, and you're trying to make something with that, and often trying to make something that somehow is convincing or looks real. And nature is super complex. There's a lot more out there than there is in the computer. So noise is often kind of like seen as salt. It's basically adding flavor. You're creating kind of a illusion of complexity. And so it's super duper useful anytime you're trying to replicate natural phenomena. But it's also actually used in a lot of ways that you might be surprised by. So even just things like an animation, you know, when you see a person or an animal moving, there's a lot of like very small kind of extra things that you wouldn't really capture just doing keyframes. So it's also used for things like that, just to add some organic salt on whatever it is that you're making.
And also, in fact, after like getting into this proper like classical noises, which are well normalized within range, have all the derivatives regular. After you dig into it, you start making like your own noises. Sometimes, at least me did. Sometimes they become not like standard noises in terms that they break some rules, but they more or less suit and some goals which you may have other, like just paint nice texture or just put some motion to the particles or so on. So it's not only about like very standard, very well-ruled things. It's just about approach in general. In fact, I would also add a couple of words that. As we and Kyle, in fact, progressed in this independently, we will be showing like demos and examples in also about different approaches. Mine it was like standard shader things like with demos from Shader Toy or whatever, and Kyle would present eventually his like totally covering everything, very nice spec field chip, which is which doesn't really make you into the coding if you don't want to. You can like construct very complex things just with standard patching, and so these two kinds of demos will be simultaneous, with more and more like switching to the end of the workshop to Kyle stuff. Yeah.
So yeah. Noise is actually used in a lot of fields, so it might mean different things if you're dealing with like signal processing or in our context of computer graphics, there's a few desirable properties of noise. This is kind of, I think, what you were getting at when you're talking about rules. Not every noise basis type will follow these. Some of them will break some of them, but basically there are things like the idea that it's non-periodic, so it's not repeating itself. You know, if you have a signal, it's always changing. Things like that it's continuous. So if you think of like white noise on a television, that's not continuous. It's really just random. What we're more interested in is continuous signals. So, you know, it might be changing, but actually it's always like a connected thing. Another property that you often look for in a noise function is that it's isotropic. So it's kind of doesn't matter which way you rotate it or change it, it sort of always has the same quality. And then again, like some of these won't necessarily follow all of those, but in terms of like being useful most of the time, that's kind of what you're looking for.
So in fact, usually words, procedures and noises are somehow used as synonyms. In fact, they are not, because procedural functions may be also not like noises in terms of they may be limited, they may be like irregular. So some other procedures and approaches you very well used include, for instance, fractals, that functions that repeat with iteration themselves, like well-known Mandelbrot functions or Julia or whatever. But again, the noises with all those characteristics which we mentioned already, they are like well suitable because they would most definitely would not break things in any situation.
So if you have it set up, I can go ahead and grab this FT noise basis one, and we'll kind of just use that to be able to continue the conversation with a little bit more visual aid as well. If anyone's like having trouble installing the stuff, just let us know and we'll give you a hand.
Yes, I have some red nodes.
Yeah. So just a quick hands up if you have any issues. Okay. So I'll just explain a little bit and then let people play with it and come help you get that set up. So this is actually using a couple nodes out of this field trip pack. You don't really need to worry about what's going on inside them so much. It's really more just to have like a quick way to have a look at the different kind of common. These are called basis functions. So they're just basically different types of noise. And the reason it's called a basis function is that often beyond just running it once, you might like run it twice into 2D or 3 times into 3D, or run it a bunch of times and make a fractal out of it. So they're called basis functions because they're often then plugged into other functions. So this noise node here is kind of like just the node in field trip that does basis functions. If you just like right click here, you can see some different types of noise. The kind of 2 most important ones that you'd tweak generally when you're making noise is actually the frequency and the amplitude. Do you want? I might just give them a quick hand. Anyone?
Yeah, okay. I will show mine.
If I'm missing. No, it's okay. I have this one. It's the same change now.
Yeah, no, it's 2 packs in it. So, yeah, they probably just need to be on the foundations. that should be right. And this is the last version. That is the version that you're running. It's not like running earlier.
Yes, yes. It's also the last version of there.
It's all this
Is there any advice there?
No, it just needs to have like graphics 11.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like a version of Visual Studio or something.
No, it's okay. Maybe.
I'll come back to you. Okay?
Yes.
I'll try to help a couple other people. Maybe it's very quick. And then
Okay. I still try to figure it out. Yeah.
Where do you put the files? Yes. Yeah, still the same. The files.
That's why they need to go inside the default folder.
Now
Then
it's
it's
the same
subfolder.
Okay, you mean here?
But these files don't come in there. Yes, here you need to have all the other text. Go you happy parts. Yeah, you need to take the one folder down.
Like this.
Yes, now she goes,
yeah, the colors one. I don't know what will be there.
Do you have the 64-bit version?
No, 32.
Then it takes the 64-bit.
Oh, okay.
I can, if you have a stick, you can put the on a stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite big. You want to give me the canal? Any?
Oh, yeah.
I'll just give you the version as well. So you want this one as well? The album comes there as well. He's fine. You're fine now.
That's it. Thank you.
I will. That's really strange. I think I have the problem. I also put jetzt das andere Pack, das ich noch schon überlegt. Latest 64. have one thing that's working.
And we're all getting the same thing with this grid noise example. You go in there and this thing.
Okay. I might need to ask Adam about that one.
Because he has it over like that.
Let me see if you can do this thing. It's happy.
I can never in there, it should be there, but I don't see it. Yes,
Apps, we don't have your noise. All good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so it's missing. There's the amps noise, it's not in the pack. This one. You look this one here. It's missing. This one in the pack here. Yeah, it's not in the you still have the email list. Just send it to your email list.
Yeah, I think that.
Half it already.
Yeah.
Half one.
Yeah.
You put everything online after the workshop anyway, so it's just that probably.
Just a few people having some issues was actually from using the using 32-bit. There's a couple plugins that are really actually meant for 64-bit. So if you're having some red nodes, that might be the issue. There's also a couple examples that have a missing file that I will send to email, which will get to most of you, and then can grab it from the others. But you don't need that for everything. It's only a couple. So were some of you getting to play around with that a little bit already? Yeah. So just
This example I put as very basic kind of noise, just value noise, because you started already with some okay, you've got also value noises here. So just close mine then.
So maybe we can just talk a little bit about kind of some of these controls, and then we'll go through the different basis types that are there and discuss them. So you've got noise is kind of like a form of a field, really, usually, because it's generally mapping a spatial domain to some kind of value or output, which is what you're using. A field function is actually really simple. The kind of classic example from the sciences is like the temperature in the room. If I'm moving around the room, that's like a XYZ. So maybe when I go closer to the window, the temperature is changing, or maybe over time the temperature will get hot in here with so many people. So that's like an example. If you've got a function that's taking a XYZ, so 3D input, and then you're just getting a single value back. And noise is kind of actually very similar. It's a mapping from space. So you generally, if you hear people talking about a 2D noise or a 3D noise, usually that's not actually referring to the result that you're getting back. It's referring to the space that's being fed into it. So if I have a function that's basically just like the XY on this desk, that would be like a 2D domain, whereas the example of the room is a 3D domain. So this example we're looking at now is actually 2D noise, and it's just the function of the kind of UV. So we've got that 2D space. What frequency is doing basically is it's taking your coordinates, so the space that you're in, and scaling it. So you're basically multiplying it by the frequency value. So if I take that very low, then also your feature details are becoming large, and as the frequency gets very high, you can see. So I think that's sort of fairly straightforward. Amplitude is really just how much you're then multiplying the result of the function by. So like, I mean, here we're just using it quite literally as a texture, but you can imagine if you were using this like as a height map or something and had a form coming from that, it would just be controlling sort of how large that distortion is. We've got like a center control here also, and that's basically just if you think of the signal from this going like this, it would just be moving the whole thing up or down. That kind of center control, it's not really a standard noise control, it's just very useful to have because you often might
It's an offset, right?
Yeah. So I actually did call it offset at first, and then I changed it just because we've got this other one here too called domain offset. And all that's doing is before you're running the noise function, you're nudging your space around. So like if you wanted to kind of give it the appearance of scrolling or something like that, you can do that. Often, like if you're using 3D noise for particles or something like that, you might just have it kind of being offset a little bit just to give the appearance of change. You can go to like 4D noise then if you want, but basically every time you add a dimension to a function, it's becoming much more expensive. So it's quite often that there's like little tricks like that people use.
But again, in fact, speaking about like 2D, 3D, and well, the dimensions, it's sometimes useful to remember that most of the time, well, okay, maybe not most, but sometimes you would need some changing like functions, and then you to your like space dimensions, you should add also times. Like if you want like 2D texture but changing this time, you should add, have 3D noise so that it's changing, not just like sliding left or right, but really changing, like staying intact.
Then we've got this shape one, which again, this isn't like a super standard noise control, but it's very useful. All it's really doing is applying like a gamma curve. So when it's on 0.5, like you can think of 0 to 1 being like a straight line, and as you move it closer to 0 or closer to 1, you can see it's basically like making it either curve like, you know, like this or like this.
So it's normalized from 0 to 1 there? Like 0.5 is no gamma?
Yeah, I mean in this case we're actually not working with values 0 to 1, but internally inside the module it's kind of normalizing it, then applying that, and then applying whatever kind of offset or scaling you're doing. So yeah. Then the last one before we start looking at the functions themselves, it might seem kind of funny to be talking about all these before we talk about the functions, but they kind of are all used every time with all of them, so just bear with me. This is called Inflection, and it's actually quite simple, but it's used a lot with noise. Most of the noise basis types naturally are kind of ranging from like about -1 to 1. So it's called signed noise because you have like positive and negative values. You have some here as well, like these Worley or cellular noises we'll get to in a second, which generally are 0 to 1 already. But basically, if you think of a normal noise signal being like this is just a sine wave obviously, but it's just for illustration. If we're using a ridge, I'll put it on one that's a bit more 0.5.
Just make frequency.
Yeah. So this is called billowed noise.
Or turbulence noise sometimes also.
Also turbulence. I should actually mention that there's a few noise terms that if you're like looking stuff up online can be like sometimes a little bit mixed or overlapped. I think some of it's different people use just different terms, and sometimes it's just kind of wrong. So yeah, you know, like sometimes people will talk about Perlin noise, but they actually mean Perlin with FBM, but we'll get into all of these things. So this is basically just taking the signal and putting a absolute function on it. Does anyone not know what absolute means? It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Square.
Yeah. So it's just basically if you've got like the 0 point, because actually here you have like a line through that's 0, so the peaks are positive and the troughs are negative. When we make it absolute, it just means anything that goes under 0 is actually flipped, so it stays positive. And so you have these kind of, you could almost say it's sort of like hills or bubbles, and it's actually used a lot in like effects that are like, you know, gas clouds or explosions or things like this. And then you have the inverse of that, which is ridge. And again, sometimes you'll hear ridge actually being used to refer to like multi-fractal FBM, which again we'll get into later. But actually all it really is just taking like 1 minus the absolute value. And so in an intuitive sense, all you're doing really is flipping this one. And that one can be quite nice sometimes when you want things like mountain ridges or this kind of, if you see noises that have this sort of spiny look to them, that's often what's going on there.
Then let's go for this, it's okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Functions.
So we'll just kind of go over the functions really quickly. The first one there is just a sinus function, and it's not even really noise.
Back to normal.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's kind of was more just to show actually that all the things that we do with these functions, you could actually do with any function. Sinus isn't really noise, but it can still sometimes be useful if you just want to add some wobble to something, and it's actually very, very cheap compared to the other ones. The first one we'll look at is value noise. Value noise is a lattice noise already, isn't it?
One part of every value noise is, nearly usual value noises are like the grid or lattice noises, but there are also gradient noises, which for instance is. So value noise, in fact, is just very simple thing that all the lattice noises are made like follows. You've got some grid or some hypergrid for higher dimensions, and you for value noise you just at every lattice period you calculate or grab some pre-computed like pseudo-random number, just put onto those nodes of lattice, and then smooth from one point to another point somehow, like usually by cubic function, so that it goes smooth with at least first derivatives regular. So you see that it already looks kind of like non-repetitive, at least like for a while. But it doesn't really look cool because you see all those like straight patterns. Even if you put like a better smoothing, not like cubic but quintic smoothing, you wouldn't get rid of those very simple irregularities. So that's why value noise are used only like when you don't really need something. You need at least some like not randomness but variativeness.
Actually, I quite like it for like some uses, like you know, if you're doing something like a spaceship hull or something like this, then actually lots of little random squares can be really nice. But if you want something more organic, then it's probably not the best choice.
And also, value noises are good for like for exploring like higher methods like those FBMs, like making fractal noises, high-level methods where you really need something fast as a basis function to be able not to kill your performance at all. So, but if this is the level where you stop it and you don't want to add some much like complexity, that value noise is probably not good on its own. So then the gradient comes. Well, for instance, pairing.
Yeah. So Perlin's probably actually the most famous noise basis function, and actually like Ken Perlin, who was making it, was pretty much responsible for kind of the modern usage of noise in computer graphics.
I got that page open in for Firefox with here it is, with some illustration, I guess.
What is it?
Yeah, just scroll down a bit.
Ah, yeah, yeah. So, Berlin noise is
Too bright projector, but anyway, well, there is, if value noise, we put some values in those points. That for gradients we grab those like say the random numbers somehow from hash functions or precomputed how do they call precomputed values and use them as gradients pointing in different directions, and then we smooth between gradients. Sometimes the gradients are used just more or less totally random. Sometimes they also used several pre-computed gradients from which we like randomly select one of those.
Yeah, yeah. Is there like 3 people that could come up for a second?
We are here.
Yeah, no, but I'm not gonna get into kind of really inside the math of the basis functions. You can have a look in the FXH files if you want. But just for like explaining this difference, just stand in the line here. First we had this kind of value noise interpolation, and now what we're talking about is a gradient noise. So basically, if each of you guys just hold your hand up. So we've got them in a line, and this is basically value noise now. If we took some tape and we went from this hand to this hand to this hand, we would have a continuous signal, and that's what we're doing. We're just interpolating between them. But because they're kind of at fixed points, and it's really at that point where it's changing, that makes it really where... It's okay. but stay for a second. That's what's making this artifact where you can really see the grid. So instead of doing this, if you all point in a random direction, and then you imagine like a spline curve or something, and it's kind of going like this and like that, that's kind of what gradient noise is doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It also applies in a 2D on both 3D dimensions.
And higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
And higher layer.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
So it means to describe the direction, you actually need more than one value, right?
Yeah. The way the basis is working is a little bit different, but ultimately it's still, you're just coming from the spatial domain and then using random numbers. And
I would just say that for like when I mentioned pre-computed values, they use for like value noise, you can definitely use either functions or just pre-computed. It's your choice. What is cheaper on your hardware or whatever. But for gradients, in fact, it may be more useful that you've got really like a table of pre-selected gradients. Like for instance, for three dimensions, they usually use gradients from the centers of opposite sides of the cube. Like so, you've got 8. Gradients, very simple ones, and the only thing that you do is randomly choose one of those. So the gradients already fixed, but it also it's also made so that those gradients would not. For instance, if you've got like this direction axis and your gradients is like this, you've got like pretty tough time trying making it regular and not like going outside of your range. So the gradients are usually more or less predefined, and you just choose now this, now that, and so it goes more or less within your.
So Simplex is actually in some ways quite similar to Perlin. I find the power spectrum to be a bit sharper with it, and it has like supposedly some advantages if you're working in higher dimensions. So if it's like 3D or higher, it's supposed to be somewhat faster.
Yeah, again, just to grab the idea that for Perlin noise we work with like standard multidimensional grid, as we all used to be like Cartesian coordinates which are perpendicular to each other, and so every time we add one dimension, we like square the number of the points which we need to like calculate a sample somehow. But for Simplex, we don't use like Cartesian coordinates, but instead we use triangles, not squares, as like main like quantum piece. So for like single dimension, obviously it's just 2 points. It's just line. For 2D, it's triangle. For 3D, it's octaedro? No, tetrahedron. Yeah. So and every time we add up one dimension, we add up just 1 point instead of just square the overall amount. So like for 2D, it's more or less the same. For 3D, it's already a bit cheaper, and for high dimensions, it's dramatically cheaper.
It's much more scalable. Yeah.
But also, in fact, as far as I remember, the one disadvantage of Simplex that it's somehow patented. I think.
It's what?
Patented.
Oh yeah.
And Perlin is just free.
So we'll go now to
It was
the.
from the same guy, right?
What's that?
Simplex was also made by Berlin, right?
I don't know actually.
I think so.
Yeah. So actually, the last two are as Worley here after the guy who came up with them, but they're also, you'll often hear to them referred to as cellular noise, and the way it's made is kind of a bit different again. I won't try to do like a human demonstration because it could get messy, but like basically you have like a grid of random points and they've all been jittered or randomized a little bit. And then the kind of basis of this noise actually has to do with the distance to the closest point, or the distance to the second closest point. This Worley fast one is kind of like a very optimized one, because actually Worley noise is quite expensive to do procedurally. So this one, like actually the extra controls that you've got here won't change anything with this one because it's kind of hard-coded how it works, but it's significantly faster than the last one. One thing I would mention that's worth having a look with it is Billow won't do anything because the Worley ones you're actually getting a unsigned value, 0 to 1. So like doing an absolute on that doesn't do anything. But if you look at the ridge, it's worth having a look at. Sorry if that's a bit bright. Yeah, maybe later we'll actually use the same noise module on some of the things that we're then using as examples later. So yeah, sometimes it's easier to see if you actually have a form that you're making with it or something rather than just a black and white texture. But if we go to the last one, then it's also cellular. But you have quite a lot of combinations actually. So as well as kind of all the normal ones that you've got here that work with the other basis, you have these two pins that are really just only for if you're using a Worley basis. If you want to just have a play around with it, you'll see you can make a lot of quite different ones. Basically, I'll explain the Worley function one first. Is I was talking about having like a kind of grid of jittered points, and so wherever you are, you're kind of looking at the closest points and seeing which one's closest. So F1 actually just means that it's kind of making this field from looking at where the closest point is. F2 is actually looking at the second closest point. Actually, if you look at some noise libraries like on the CPU, sometimes they're also kind of going much higher than this. You might go like F3, F4, F5. For doing it on the GPU, like we are now, it's not really super feasible to go higher. And actually, most of the really useful patterns you can actually get with F1 and F2. F2 minus F1 is kind of self-explanatory, I think. Average is just averaging them. Crackle, I can't actually remember off the top of my head what that does, but it's taking F1 and F2 and doing something with it. If you can have a look in the noise header file later.
This basically are how it uses the points in the grid, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is basically just taking the either kind of the closest point or the second closest point, or a combination of them through one of these. What these ones are is a little bit more weird. This is actually the distance metric. So here we're talking about what's far away, but here we're talking about what far away actually means. So I mean, if you're using the second one, then it's kind of pretty intuitive. It's just a normal way that distance works. So you know, if you've got like it's kind of like Pythagoras or something like that. You've got a point here and a point here, and actually the length of that is this and this squared or whatever it is. The squared one is kind of just a shortcut where it kind of works the same, but you're saving on some calculations. The other ones are more interesting. If you have a little play with them, you see you start to get like some funny kind of like right angles or diamond shapes or things. So like, I think Manhattan, is that like the taxi one?
Oh, in fact, didn't dig into
So
original meaning for them.
If you want to have a look at the exact formulas, it's all in the header file, but just as an example, what I mean by an alternative distance metric, I think Manhattan is like also called taxi distance, but it's like if you had to go from here to there, instead of like walking straight, it's the distance of only kind of going like in a straight line always. So it's just basically having a different way that you're calculating the distance, and that's what you're then using to see what's close, and that's why you kind of have this sort of distinctive sharp angles in it.
And some also Minkowski, or I would add in fact some example where I mentioned at the beginning that sometimes it's useful, and most of the times it's definitely fun to play with things, trying to get some results, even if there is no like deep meaning under it, but just to try other stuff. Here are some other functions which, as far as I get, were not, at least this one was, was made just for look, not because there is some kind of like original math, as it was the case for like Chebyshev or Minkowski things. And I also, for some projects, I did a couple of I wouldn't call it distance functions, in fact, because they are like just kind of random combinations of like modulars of those distances, but they looked cool, and they were very well suited for the project I did. So in fact, just to play with those functions and with those values somehow, when you just get used to it a bit, may bring some really nice results as well. Despite they don't have like proper scientific or mathematical reasoning behind them.
That's beautiful.
It's very good. It's very good for masking city landscapes. In fact,
Cool.
Okay.
Sorry? I have a question. If you are done, how are the random values being generated?
You're missing ESP.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll pop that out just in a sec.
Folders is, for example,
You can pass it around.
Oh, did you find it?
Yeah, it's in a few folders there, so I found it and put it in the happy folder. And
Okay, so
Yeah.
that was also
so
an old version of
it's
it.
in the folders you share, but not you have to copy it and put it in
Yeah.
the happy folder.
Yeah, yeah.
I will look for it here.
So we're not gonna go too deeply into this, but someone was just asking like where the random numbers are coming from, and actually it's like mostly using kind of some hash functions for that. So that there's kind of different methods for this. A lot of the time, actually, you can use like pre-computed values. So you just have a table that you're kind of looking up in different ways. So sometimes you might have a texture that you look up. That's actually a little bit faster. These ones are based on largely on functions from a guy called Brian. What's that? Yeah, it's got his name here.
Sharply. Shape, I don't know how to pronounce the fact. I've got it in mind.
Oh yeah, I'll look it up in a sec. Anyway, these ones are just procedural, and so actually, like in some ways, it's a tiny bit slower if you're just like running the function once, but it's also more scalable. So like if you're using texture-based noise and you need to do like 160 lookups or something, actually then it gets to be a bottleneck. Whereas if it's just procedural, you can scale it up a little bit more. It's a little bit easier to use also because you're not copying assets around with it. You know, you don't always have to have the texture file with it and then something in the patch that's loading the texture file. So it's just kind of a little bit more turnkey. But I'm really not gonna go so much into the underbelly of the basis functions themselves. We're more interested today in how we can use them and what other functions can be built on top of them. But if you're kind of interested to go more deeper in that, you can have a look in the header file and also hit me up. I've got like lots of books and papers and things that you can have a look at.
I was referring maybe to more of the physical side. Is it maybe I understood that it's like the noise in the electric current someplace in
No. This is kind of what I was mentioning. The noise is used in lots of different fields and things, but actually in this case we're just using pseudo-random number generators. Yeah.
Hey, what was the patch that you opened before? It was like a Kel patch with animation.
I think it's a cell noise one. Which one did you have open just before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
to Cellular.
the cubes one is from
It's cool, isn't it? Yeah. I don't really want to add that.
The cubes are from, I believe, from Shader Toy. There was some radio, some Voronoi, it's called there.
Are you guys? Are you happy to keep going? Does that all make sense so far?
I've got a question, mate. You can't see me, but I can see you, bro. Don't you worry. Hash table versus texture. You just mentioned it quickly. How does it compare in terms? Because he's faster, isn't it?
Well, it's not really a hash table. It's a hash function.
Yeah, sorry,
so,
hash function.
yeah.
I meant sorry. But how does it compare in terms of optimization? When you see the text, because I tried texture versus like IQ noise and all this stuff,
Yeah.
and the texture version is always a bit faster.
Yeah.
How does it? How much do you lose or?
As I understand it, and just like a head-to-head, the texture one will always be faster.
Yeah.
The procedural one is a little bit more scalable. If you're having to kind of do it on a really large scale, it just scales a bit better. But beyond that, it's just a little bit more convenient, I find, because you're not always having to have an asset.
But then also,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
the image is predefined.
And
this is procedural, so actually you get more.
I guess for your
variance.
4K demos,
You can get more
textures are worse
Ultimately,
than
yeah, I
functions.
think it's probably hard to really see with the eye, like.
Well, it depends. I've used some noises that have hard functions like in the shader code, and those actually you can tell. That
Yeah.
It's kind of always the same pattern.
Yeah, it's
Where the
repeating.
procedural one always feels a little bit more
Yeah,
predictable.
yeah.
So I wonder if that's a part of it, even if.
Probably depends on the function.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about like a whole class of functions. So yeah.
So let me quickly cover Gabber. There are also some other types of approaches and methods of doing noise. One of well, maybe not so very widely used, and it's not as diverse and has many different flavors as
Hey, quiet in the back.
as cellulars or lattice noises, but also pretty funny one is so-called spot noise, or more like scientifically speaking, space convolution. It looks pretty funny. In fact, there were also a couple of demos at the very beginning to show a bit, like for instance these, or even in fact these. It's just taken from Shader Toys, but this one has more or less self-explaining code for those who do shaders, and in fact the idea behind it and realization, at least of this one, is pretty simple. In fact, what is happening is that we use a lot of so-called kernels, that means some kind of spots, and every spot has two functions multiplied. Like first function is just Gaussian distribution to somehow limit the values, make it making this spot limited. And on this within this Gaussian we add up some just scene function to make it periodical. And so every little kernel, every little spot, we in fact see it here, like small things within which we have more or less the same structure. And we calculate a lot of such kernels around so that they overlap and combine somehow on the edges. And then we can play with how our every sign function within one spot is obviously has specific direction, and playing within how these directions are aligned all to one axis or just more dispersed, we can get pretty various results in general, and well, all those wave-looking functions are pretty good to be with using this noise.
So yeah, there's a quite tidy code example there if you want to implement it yourself. If you're patching also, I will put this one in field trip at some point. I haven't gotten around to it. It's Gabor is actually quite an interesting basis function. It's relatively new compared to the other ones we were looking at. And it's a little bit sort of fundamentally different in the way it actually works. You have quite a lot of control over the spectral frequency and things like this. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, well, one thing to add is that if lattice or cellular noises were constructed having in mind results, like values of the noise, how it would look like, then the Gabber one was constructed not having in mind its look, but having in mind its power spectrum, how it would fit within different frequencies, which it's more about I don't know, not look of the shape, but from the point of signal treatment that the noise
is anyone a little bit confused when we start talking about the power spectrum? Yeah, it's okay. Basically, all it means is we're talking about some random distribution of values, so from 0 to 1 or from -1 to 1. And that's fine, we've got some function and it always gives us back values in this range and we're happy. But actually, with most of these functions, it's not a uniform distribution. So, if you look at this bar graph here, this is They took a particular noise function and looked at 10,000 values, and this was like the distribution of them. So that's kind of what we're talking about. We won't get into it too much today, but like a fairly advanced topic is like kind of how to normalize that. You know, if you want controls where actually your distribution's even though it's not, you can do things like analyze a lot of values and then have a mapping that comes from that. But that's all that we're really talking about when we talk about the spectrum. Make sense? Yep. Do you want to do more out of these? We'll probably go to like some concept of FBM soon.
Yeah, I think we can go further for. We already covered inflection, so let's go for fractals.
We're gonna do our best to kind of cover the main bases. I'm quite sure there'll be a fair few patches we don't even open, but you can always have a play with them. So we want to talk now about fractal sums. So if you've ever heard of like FBM, that's probably the kind of most common example of a fractal sum. But I'll just take a patch example first, and then we'll like open a more visual one. But I just want to kind of talk about what's going on here for a second. If you want, you can open that one up so you can play around with it a little bit. This probably isn't like a perfect translation of it all, but it's basically just the idea that we're doing the whole thing just in a patch first, because the examples we'll use, at least from my stuff, are using like macros, and it's quite hard to read in the code in an easy way. But the basic idea...
But again, those like the other examples which are not by TileSpark but in forms of shaders, they are pretty, I guess, more or less self-explainable, so you can get the idea from it as well, and also from the doc files.
Yeah, we were originally like trying to figure out what the best format is and what we would have to port everything to, and then we thought actually it's nice having some kind of clean code examples, and then there's also this patching system that if you're not coding you can use as well. So the idea with a fractal sum is basically just you're taking, sorry, just come near the microphone. You're taking a function, and in this case it's the basis functions that we're interested in. And you're just running it again and again and again, and then taking like some kind of algorithm that sums those up. So in this case, what we're actually basically doing is messing with the frequency and the amplitude. So we've got frequency and amplitude. Here our basis function is just a sine, I believe. Yep. And so we've got like a starting frequency, and you've got, does anyone know how to pronounce lacunarity?
Yeah, lacunarity. That's just me trying, mate. I'm with it.
Okay, well, that sounds good.
That was wrong, bro.
I've read about it. Basically what it's actually referring to is we're taking our function and repeating it at higher and higher frequencies. So like the kind of landscape example of that would be if you've got really big mountains, those are kind of the low frequencies, and then you've got like the kind of smaller details, frequencies getting higher, and then you're zooming into like pebbles and dust, that's really high frequency. So the lacunarity basically is the gap, or how far apart those frequencies are. So you know, if you, I'll just kind of move that a little bit. So as I put that down, you can see on the left, you can see those values are actually coming closer together. Yeah, and as I put it up, they're getting further apart. The octaves is just how many times we're actually going to run it. In a perfect world, we'd run it like hundreds of times, and actually in motion pictures, they do that a lot. Really, like if you see like, you know, a movie that's maybe a disaster movie or like the perfect storm or something like that, the oceans and things, they run a lot of these noise algorithms hundreds of times. For us, it's kind of actually usually about 8 is you don't really need more than that, and sometimes you can get away with less. So it's just how many times it's running it. And so basically, in code, this would all be done in a loop. In a patch, it's a little bit different, but it's basically, you could say we're just every time we go to the next line, we're multiplying our current frequency by that amount. And the persistence is kind of the same thing in reverse for the amplitude. So if you think of like the mountain example again, when you're getting to the really high frequencies and pebble and dust, you don't want them to be huge. Basically, as the frequency goes up, the amplitude goes down, and you'll see that again and again. And so here we've got this persistence value, which is actually below 1, and then each time we go, we're multiplying it by that also. So it's kind of the same thing, but you generally speaking, you'll have like a linearity value that's somewhere around 2, and a persistence value that's somewhere like 0.8 or 0.9. It depends on what function you're actually using, but just as kind of having a rough idea, this one's intended to make it bigger each time, and this one's intended to make it smaller. Now, at the end here, we've got like still this spread of values that we've kind of messed around with our frequency and our persistence, and all we're doing really here is just like making an average of them. And the exact way that works will depend on your FBM function. So we'll look at a couple of different ones of those. That has some good results, and we've got some nodes in field trip that do that for you as well.
I would just repeat what Kyle said from a bit different side. I mean about those like persistence and linearity, because in fact when I faced it like this, I didn't understand nothing at once at first. So I think it's better to just make sure that everything is clear. In fact, like classic idea of like simple fractal stuff would be when linearity is 2 and persistence is 0.5. Like so, we just on every step we make frequency twice lower, and also we make frequency twice more. That means the period is twice smaller, and also amplitude is twice smaller. It's like a pretty logical thing which you can easily just imagine and understand how it goes. So like first you have some like smooth curves, then you add some more like jiggle around, then you add more of them and they are smaller, and so you go like this, having all the time doing step by two, which is more or less obvious. The point is why those values are explicitly exposed and why they are so like something about but not exact values is because of we need, as Carl said in the beginning, we need we need a kind of isotropic and not so regular structure. So if we put like everything divided or multiplied by 2, we will definitely see some grid, because every next harmonics, every next octave would fit exact times within the like original grid period. And if we make it non-regular, like 1.75 and 1.93, then we will have some much less harmonic, and it was much less regular, obvious mathematical structure, but that's what we need, and that's why we go for that.
What's the magic numbers?
I think it's not a magic number, but like traditional wisdom is instead of picking 2, you might pick like 1.97 or something, just so that it's not like really cleanly repeating.
Some sort of special prime number that ensures that.
Let me know if you find it.
It's kind of working with the fractal modulation and Fourier decomposition is kind of merging that things. I realize. I don't know if you work with that kind of stuff, but I don't know, talking about the harmonics and not about that thing, but applying that to this kind of functions is a kind of weird result it gives.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of fractal in fractal Brownian motions really coming from the point that you're taking the same function and then repeating it at different scales. And I mean, it's not really actually properly fractal because it's, we're only going down 8 levels or something, but it gives the appearance of that.
I would add also one comment which just at the moment came to my mind. Well, when we were speaking about the harmonics and how they fit within ranges, that maybe that is one of the reasons why noises call noises. In fact, because if we put special degrees of 2 every time, we would make some, maybe, I don't know, tune or accord, but we wouldn't make real noise. And as soon as we tweak it properly, we've got noise both in its original human meaning and in our procedural thing.
Should I open the field trip fractals on one or both?
Oh, let me show some
please.
of my patches here. There are also, okay, let's start with this one. There are, as the same way as there are different functions and the different ways of to calculate, to construct some kind of noises, there are different ways of calculating fractal or fractional. It's the same sums when we add up some smaller higher harmonics. The very this patch called OLFBM takes the very basic value noise, just because on using it as example, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty easy to see how those fractional sums changes stuff, because for better noises it may be not so obvious.
What does FBM stand for?
Fractal or fractional Brownian motion. That iterative procedure which Kyle just described, it's called exactly like that. So the first one is the simplest. That means that this is octave 0, that is pure noise. Then as we add some harmonics for this time, it's about. We start to see that regularities just disappear, but instead we get some other patterns which are which come from the regularity of our original noise, which cannot be avoided when we use just simple adding up harmonics, even with those tweaked parameters, but without any additional tricks. So the next one, which is pretty nice and pretty fun, is multifractal, multifractal ones, which, as far as I remember, use weights or weights. In terms of if we think and if we speak about noise as texture, like a visible texture, it's pretty easy to understand what is those multi stands for, because in fact what we need, we don't just add up every next sum, but we multiply it on the original, on the previous, on what we have previously, so that it masks somehow that if we, for instance, have white, that is higher value here, and we add up something, it's added up. But if there is 0, we don't have real value there. It's just thrown down, so that it's more intelligently.
Can I just paraphrase that again?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that was well explained, but it's just always nice to hear it explained a couple different ways. But basically, like with normal FBM, you're repeating this function again and again, but each octave is really operating independently, if that makes sense. They don't really know about the octave that came before or what's going on with that. They're all doing their own thing, and then it gets squished together, and that works great. But it's also makes like the quality of the fractal is basically the same everywhere, and that's what multifractal is referring to. In the case of a multifractal algorithm, this is kind of a really common one that we've implemented, but you can actually make lots of them. And what makes a multifractal is when it's usually you're using kind of some part of the previous octave to feed into the octave that you're making. And this makes a really different process because you kind of have these runaway processes where, you know, like if the signal's really high here, then it will amplify the other octaves as well. And in this area it started low, so the other octaves are also not as active. And it results in having, like, if we're using the kind of terrain metaphor, that you have some areas that are just quite different to other areas, which can be nice.
So, in a simplistic way, you could say that the FBM is adding the octaves together, and the MFBM is multiplying them?
Agent is multiplied on previous.
They're actually both adding, but in the case of the multifractal, the octave is being weighted by the values of the octaves that came before. Yeah.
So sorry, is there any way to change the way you multiply from the previous octave, or you said it could be adding it? Could we be subtracting it?
Yeah, I mean you can do whatever you want basically, and there are some really interesting odd ways of doing it. The ones we've implemented here are the ones that are kind of just really commonly used because they're really useful, but you can absolutely tweak that and get some funny results out of it. Yeah.
Here, as in both in my examples and Kyle's library field trip pack, there are two more ways of like adding up FBMs, that IQ FBM and something called Swiss FBM. And then even for these very simple basic noise like value noise, they pretty soon becomes kind of tricky. That's a bit about what you mentioned, that these are different ways of weighting and of calculating every next sum, so it produces some really funny results, in fact. So and obviously you're free to like tweak it somehow to make it even like funny stuff.
So how do you know in the MFBM how you say it weighs it from the previous?
Okay, well it's completely up to you and how you design the function. For a multifractal FBM, like the standard implementation, it's actually just taking the kind of the noise result or the value of the previous one. These sort of more exotic ones are doing something similar, but instead of taking the value from the function, it's actually using the derivatives or the gradient from that result, which I don't know if everyone understands that, but we've got a patch about it. So. I'm just I'll open up before going on the gradient. I'll just quickly will also show you there's like a field trip patch here as well, which is kind of essentially that same one we were playing with before, but you can also just have a look. This is basically in the field trip system. Don't worry so much about the switch. All that's doing is changing what it's routed through. But on 0 here, you're just using the basis function only. If you put that on 1, then you'll be running it through FBM, and if you put it on 2, then you'll be running it through a multifractal. One thing, if you have a look on the multifractal, you'll notice is that you actually, just from the nature of the algorithm, you'll want like quite a high persistence value. And that's one thing to be aware of when you're kind of messing around with like different FBM algorithms. Sometimes they may also impact like on the sweet spot of what you want set on your basis function as well.
It can actually be greater than 1, the persistence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of things that you wouldn't do typically that in some situations, you know, if it works, it's.
Let me also show some just quickly nice this. And there is another page just as a visual example of what can be easily achieved. This example already is made up on Kyle's, not on Kyle's field trip, but on the FXH files with. So we use the same noises with Kyle, but this is just like shader implementation of some of the noises for the same function as Kyle used as well. So these are those. IQ and Swiss FBMs methods of summing up, but more like better noises than just value, like Turbulent, Simplex, Cellular, and stuff.
If you are writing shader code and you kind of just want to use any of these functions, just in that happy.fxh, there's one called noise.fxh, and that's what like at least all the field trip ones are built off of, and I think Badam's got some from them and some from other exotic places as well.
Yeah, actually, sorry, mate, I'm jumping on this as well because I'm hoping to use this in. I'm shameless plugging. There's a remarching workshop going on Saturday, and we're going to render this shit in 3D, so all better cut. So, are you? How do I use this in my remarching workshop? As in, once I've got something that I like.
We'll sit down and like.
We'll do introduction to your workshop later.
Yeah.
I already did, mate.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Is it possible that the file
it's somewhere on other directories. It was not copied properly in.
The file? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can give the USB.
Okay. He'll bring it for you. Otherwise, there's another folder it's in that you can grab. I'm not sure.
yeah, I found it.
Ah, cool. Yeah.
You don't need it anymore?
It's like 11:30, so we're actually pretty on a good way, I think. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the gradient now, which is kind of like a pretty general mathematical concept, actually, but we'll make it kind of pretty easy. In itself, it's not about noise, but it's used a lot with noise and a lot of other things, so it's quite kind of useful to know about. So this is basically just a visualization of the gradient. And if go back to that kind of example of like having a point in the room and that's a temperature, basically what the gradient is saying is wherever you are, if you're pointing in the direction that the temperature is increasing, then that vector where you're pointing, that's the gradient. If you have like, I mean, that's in multiple dimensions, but if you have just like a 1D function, it's also the slope of the function. So it's you can think of a surface. It's kind of how steep it is, or that sort of thing.
The tangent, right?
Yeah. Basically, you have the derivative or the tangent, which is kind of how a function is changing. So it's kind of like the neighborhood around the function. All of the gradient really is if you've got like a function that's coming from like a 2D or a 3D or higher space. It's just kind of each component of that. So you've got the derivative in x and the derivative in y, and if you take that as a vector, that's the gradient. And so, yeah, like it's some of those other FBMs we looked at before. We're using it in field trip. You kind of have some nodes that. Like you've got this gradient node here, and basically we'll take any function and work out the gradient for you. So here, even though our function is just a single value, because it's in 2D space, our gradient's 2D also. And so this is kind of just a good thing to know about in general, even aside from those fancy FBMs and things that can be really useful if you want to, for example, have things go uphill or downhill or It's also pretty useful for some other sorts of kind of vector calculus stuff. You've got like curl as well, which is basically built on top of them. We've still got this same noise module here, so it actually has all of the controls. And so you can see with some of the different ones just what it's looking like. If you go on this switch here, then it'll switch over to curl, which is quite nice. And now you can see where actually it's really useful being able to figure out what the derivatives are, because it lets you do sort of this sort of stuff. Curl's used really a lot, like in fluid simulations and things like this. And it's also quite nice for particles. I think we'll look at an example in a little bit with some 3D particles in curl. And if you just use like a normal noise, it's quite nice for particles because you can have them kind of move around randomly and stuff. But you might be familiar with clumping. It's like where the particles are all going through the vector field, but somehow they're all getting like stuck in a cloud or something, or having like a place that they all gather. And what's quite nice about a curl field is it's divergence free, which divergence basically just means like if you think of this as water, for example, if we had like a tap that was putting water in it, or we had a drain that was pulling water out of it, those would be examples of divergence. So it's like all the arrows coming into a point, or all the arrows going away from a point. And it's, yeah, if you've got a curl field, you have this nice property that it doesn't have divergence, which also ends up preventing things like particles getting clumped together. And I just like the shapes you get if you...
So it's just 90 degrees from the gradient?
Yeah, basically. You've got kind of the two most common cases of curl. You've got if it's like just a single value 2D field, so also a scalar field it's called, but it's basically just like this noise is a 2D scalar field. So we've got a 2D area, but we're getting one value back. If you say vector field, then we'd get a 2D value back. We've actually built up a 2D field because we're taking the gradient from the noise. But in 2D with curl, you're taking like a single value, finding the gradient of that, and then kind of going sideways to turning 90 degrees, but basically you end up kind of getting these contour lines. In 3D, it's a little bit more complicated. For 3D, you kind of take a 3D vector as the input and you get a 3D vector out again.
I would add up some kind of like common sense or physics-based comment that in general you can take it, this, like for this example, this 2D field like texture, this like value noise can be seen easily as kind of obstacles on the ways of, for instance, particles or whatever. And so the higher value, like the higher obstacle is, and so the better like flow or particles or fluid should go somewhere else just to flow it over. And those tangents show the direction how it should go so that not to hit it.
Kind of repelling forces.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Can this be translated into a normal map?
Yes, you can. Actually,
Actually, gradients and normal maps are more or less this.
Booms.
I mean, for that you don't even need to get into the field trip stuff. This one here is taking like a field trip function and converting it to a DirectX 11 texture, and then that's just kind of the standard DirectX 11 texture. It takes a grayscale image and turns it into a normal map. So yeah, I mean it's quite straightforward to do. Just to be aware if you're doing that, what your kind of scaling and stuff is for the source noise field. But yeah, you can totally use that to make procedural normal maps. You can also use it like quite directly in the shader for bump mapping or this kind of thing as well. ultimately kind of the same. They probably both have some advantages and disadvantages. Yeah. Did you want to show anything else from part 1? Or?
I think the one will be more or less it. We can go further.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to start with?
I may start just with those nice simple examples with texture or what.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me cover those first directories, and then I'll try to do for most of the other stuff. So for use cases, I just put here some of the things which I used, like myself, based on noise on different occasions. So first of all, obviously you can use the noises to generate some some eye candy in terms of just using values directed to produce the image. Here it's not like, it doesn't look like normal noise textures which we were showing before that, but it's in fact directly based on noise. That means that I took the noise, just one-dimensional noise on the x-axis. So these are the value of the noise somehow treated, its reach multiplied by some turbulence. But anyway, these values are some simple combination of some simple noises. And then I just put it into polar coordinates, and it would look like a black hole from Inception or from Interstellar. So that would be more or less okay. So this is one of the way of using noises in like your homework, whatever. Some other things which you can use directly, noise textures, as they are pretty nice, is like another example found on Shader Toy, like Beast noise. It's a bit, well, a tiny bit more than we explained for all the Perlin stuff and stuff, obviously. But well, as far as there is.
This is actually like a good example of a basis function that's kind of breaking some of those rules we were talking about. But actually, like if you like the way it looks, then it doesn't really matter so much. There are some use cases where like actually it's quite important that it's a continuous function. You know, you might have trouble getting rid of rendering artifacts or things like that if it's not. But yeah, you know, if it's interesting and looks good, you can usually also find a way to use it.
Yeah, I really love to use this as a displacement map onto the images. It's pretty like.
Right, so you get cubist painting.
Yeah. That's it. That's why it's called so. So these are just some cases of already mentioned. Yeah. Okay. Already mentioned and you used noises, but I just put here some pre-selected setups and parameters which were more or less cool looking. Next thing is obviously to use noises for tweaking other things. Like getting some image and tweak UV coordinates so it's warped somehow.
So far we've just really been taking noise as kind of just literally a texture itself. But now we're starting to look at some of the other uses, because ultimately it's just a value, so we can use it for lots of things. So like with this example, we have a different image, and we're using the noise to distort the UV coordinates for it.
Which is also called domain displacement or domain distortion.
Domain distortion.
Yeah, domain is our space, like in this screen space, which we distort somehow by the noise value.
If you've ever tried to like walk in a straight line whilst drunk, that's kind of like domain distortion.
What kind of noise is that?
Yeah, the same thing, but just in 3D displacement. That we've got some like sphere, which is distorted also by not in 2D in screen, but in 3D space.
It was the same way.
Just half as bad things in the digital.
One also example of using those curl noises for like kind of fluid simulation, but not with particles, but also with the displacement of 2D, of usual image, of usual texture. There are several different basis functions used with curl treatment here, but they all look more or
You
less.
can think of these like gradients and curl as higher order functions. So it's kind of like the FBMs. So it's a function that's actually taking a function and then doing something more with it. So you're running a function on a function. So you can have the curl of Simplex, or the curl of value noise, or the gradient of Perlin, or yeah.
Derivative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, here's also just we can look at just values using it only as displacement, and also I added some bump for using gradients, which Kyle mentioned also, so that it looks even better. Yeah, this in fact I called it mask because it started as a mask, but eventually it ended up as also some kind of using gradients for UV tweaking, and using gradients here obviously produced effect like kind of refraction because it, well, in general it's how basic refraction behaves yourself. I think that should be it. Well, there are some different types of noises, both cellular and so okay, these are just tangents which demonstrate some approaches which you can use your your noises mostly for 2D images, for generating images, for simple stuff. And Kyle will cover, I guess, like more complex things for all the rest. So I guess we'd better go a bit over for curl. We already put it.
So this is kind of a pretty simple but pretty common use case. We're just taking our noise function and then using it to displace a grid. So it's being a height map. So it's the same controls actually. If you want to mess around with seeing what it looks like. This one, I think it's got an orbit camera, so if you just left click to orbit or right click, you can zoom in and out. This is actually at the moment it's just making a mesh. So like if I go to the rasterizer here, I can see the actual. So put the resolution up fairly high, but you can see like if you need to, you can put it down lower if your computer's not running so fast. So like with this, I mean, as we get to higher frequencies, it's kind of hard to capture that in the mesh. You can probably see it more when it's shaded still. So yeah, you can start to see those artifacts from having triangles. So you can, there's a few things you can do about that. You can have a really large mesh, you can use tessellation, or you can also actually, if you want, you can also do ray marching. So that's actually the same formula but ray marched, and that's kind of cool. It also has some disadvantages. It might make your computer cry, but you can see like it's kind of just rendering off into infinity.
But is it now based upon the texture?
No, it's based on the function. So there's a node.
In that ray marching, you have the function that's used in the noise above, or
no. So basically. Okay, I'll just like, I'll take 2 minutes to explain the kind of field trip thing. So we're actually making our function for both here, so it's completely separated. Basically the ray marcher has like a placeholder function in it, so it's just got something that it's going to do if you don't give it a function, but actually it's expecting to receive a function. So you could actually take other field trip nodes and edit this function here if you wanted, and it would actually then still feed into the same implementation. You don't need to rewrite the shader that's doing the ray marching. So you can see here you've got this SF2D function. What that's standing for is a 2D scalar field. So in field trip, basically it's mostly made to work with kind of 4 function types. You've got SF2D, which is a 2D scalar function. You've got a VF2D, which is a 2D vector function. And then the same thing with 3D functions. But it's literally like inside of that, it's just a snippet of shader code. And then it's in the modules that use it, they kind of know how to take that and map it onto whatever they're doing. Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool, yeah. Thank you.
So what's the difference?
But tell me, bro, that this is a kind of node-based SDF builder stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, the SDF stuff. I do have a couple examples. We're not really going to get into too much today, but yeah, it's basically designed for modular function building. And you can kind of do that to an extent with like instance noodles or something, but it's different because with instance noodles you're actually rendering discrete results to a buffer. With this you're still kind of dealing with an abstract function, which sounds like a subtle difference, but it's important because if you want to do something like an FBM or something, you still need access to the underlying function. Or ray marching is kind of the same sort of problem that actually you need to run the function again and again. So just having a buffer doesn't really help you then because you don't know how the function was working. So yeah, basically you just have this one node and you're connecting that to any of the kind of nodes that use a function. At the moment you kind of also have to connect the semantics as well. So like if you're making your own field trip patch just to know, as well as having the function in a node that actually uses them, you kind of, don't know, it's kind of a bit funny, like some invisible chords there or something.
They're grayed out.
But yeah.
The contrast of the projector doesn't show the hidden.
But this cons here is like a render semantics one, and all that means basically is it's what lets us keep the parameters or the controls for the noise up there where the noise is instead of down here where we're using it. And that's kind of important if you want like a modular system that's putting shaders together. You can't really have the controls down where the actual shader is because you can break things easily then.
Sorry, did you find any other way to push a created noise function as you're doing now as something else than a string of character which you then compile? So am I right to assume that this is basically pushed through a string?
I mean, ultimately, if it's a function, it is. Ultimately, if it's a function, it is kind of a string. Yeah. Ideally, I actually want to bundle this up into a single type so that you're not having to connect the semantics extra. So it would just be like a function type that has all of that bundled in it. But for the function itself, yeah, I mean,
You have to. There's no way to make some kind of really clever dynamic macro shit. But
No, you can, but like you're still sort of basically coding all the parts, and then yeah.
So there's no
if
pasting.
you talk to Greg Asan, I think he's got some kind of different systems like that you might check out. Yeah.
Thanks,
I don't know, but like you might see if you change the basis types, your FPS will vary. There's quite a bit of a difference in the computational cost between these. It's sort of very roughly speaking going from simplest to most complex in that list, somehow roughly. But yeah, so like what you're then doing with it, in ray marching, won't go too much into it. I did hear that there's some guy doing a ray marching workshop later in the week.
That was cancelled actually
just
seconds ago.
Oh good, that guy's the worst.
Apparently he's still some dickhead logo. He's just a stitcher. We're going to watch epic marine animal fighting, and that's all.
Okay, so that. So in ray marching, you're actually running the function a lot of times because like you're stepping closer, and yeah, you can go to it if you want to learn more about it. But the point is, however expensive it is here, is getting multiplied a lot. So you might find if you're ray marching a Berlin field, you're fine, but if you switch to the last one, to the Worley one, it'll probably like your computer might slow down a bit. That's kind of to be expected. Yeah, so I mean, if you want, you can just like have a little play around with that. I think when you can see it in 3D, some of these controls are much more intuitive to see the results of them. So like now I'm just playing with the shape, for example, and it's doing exactly the same thing, but this is much easier to read with the eye than this is, particularly in this light. But that's the raw texture there. So yeah, I can just have a little play around with those and see how it affects the landscape. One thing with ray marching in particular, often if you're using noise, it's kind of not a really clean distance function. I won't go too much into the ray marching story, but if you put the frequency up quite high, I don't think I have it exposed, but there's a pin on that ray march node there called march step length. And if you're going to like a really high frequency, you'll start to see some artifacts and things. There we go, you see that? That guy there? And so to a point, you can get rid of those by putting this down. So now it's kind of a little bit more clean again. But yeah, it is making the whole thing more expensive basically because it's taking longer to do the march.
Let me show a couple of my marching. Speaking about using noises for marching, I would show a couple of results. One of generally more or less the same as what Kyle's shown. Well, a bit more colors, as I usually love colors. But anyway, in general, it's the same, that it's kind of plane extruded somehow by nose functions. Here are two of them. One is Cellular and another one is just Perlin Reach, I guess, which are like combined together, painted with different colors, so that they're like easy seen. But in general, it is just plain tweaked, curved by the noise. Another approach, which is so much more expensive than this one, is when you use let me get more light. Too dark. Not really. Okay, here is not just one plane, but instead, in this example, I took two noises, combined them with some like rematching tricks. I guess Mangosh tomorrow will cover it much better in details, like junction, when you got two several shapes, and when the shapes are close enough to each other, they are like smooth somehow into one single shape. So here are two different noises. One is like just a simple value noise. Another one is a bit some kind of pattern, and two different ways of combining them together produce these like strange looking shapes in the points of their most where they intersected, and the combined value is the most one, and those areas are smooth somehow. So this is like proper volume. It can be limited by some other like constraints, but in general it's not just one single plane, one single surface.
Your laptop is a beast.
Huh?
Your laptop is a beast.
It's getting ready for takeoff. Can I just really quickly just say like what? So this is actually like literally using the noise as a distance function somehow.
Yes,
right? Yeah. So like a sine distance function is basically you often see it for like spheres or cubes or thing like that. But all it means is it's a function where we're taking the space and getting a value back, the same as noise. So in the case of a sphere, it's the further away you are from the sphere, that's the distance value you get. So things like ray marching algorithms just look at that distance value, and where it's getting close enough to zero, that's where there's a surface. And so you can use noise as a distance function also. It's not like strictly correct, so you often have to like maybe dial the march step size down a little bit, but you can get some really crazy sort of infinite tendrils.
Yeah, and obvious more well-known things which you may, if properly set up, not like break the CPU fan, are kind of proper volumetric, where you use it's also two most well-known use cases for noises are like generating landscapes or generating clouds. So here is one of them, when we use volume 3D noise as like density field, and just calculate how it's also kind of ray tracing, like kind of ray marching, which just trace our like space with density clouds and visualize them somehow. There are just two examples, not mine, just taken from Shader Toy. No, one from Shader Toy, another one I believe it's not camera here. This one I believe is from some pretty old contribution from me, I guess. But anyway, in general, they both do the same, like volumetric ray marching.
So, any questions or anything? Good to keep going?
Yeah. I have a question for you too. Yeah. What? I don't know how to say it. How much of this is tinkering? How much of this is experience? How much of this is mathematics?
That's a very good question.
What's this?
Because it's I don't know. At the beginning, it works much with the combination of functions, and I think that knowing the mathematics of all of this, it's kind of a manner to facilitate things for you to work, to just not have this big computer just to try out things, but to know how to calculate stuff before, obviously the amount of pixels are working off, and just, I don't know, just to work with that kind of hardware you have, and say, okay, I have this, I know I want to do this kind of stuff, so.
Yeah, so I guess, like, I mean, probably really depends on the person at a point, so I can only speak to sort of my own experience, but I would actually say, like, if you're interested in the underlying basis functions and stuff, for sure, kind of check it out. It is really interesting, and you can tinker with them quite a bit also. But in terms of actually making things, there's really some pretty good established components and things that, like even before talking about actual modules, that's kind of a bit higher level, but the kind of standard basis functions and things you can do a lot with, really. And then when you add kind of the different ways to combine that with things like gradients and all this sort of thing, I think it's really limited. You could absolutely sort of spend a lifetime exploring this without actually having to invent new math or anything. But if it interests you, for sure, check it out. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it will take a pretty long time to exhaust all this, which is already like patched and coded. But if you feel like you know what would you like and it's not there yet, well, you don't need definitely you don't need to go into every detail. It's definitely helps just to understand the underlying blocks, like for those cellular noises. Okay, here's our like cells, here's our functions. Okay, if I want some stranger shapes, I'd better play with like distance functions or with those combinations f2 min minus f1. These are like better to grasp at some point because this would allow you like a couple of more dimensions to tweak. But you don't need to. Me personally, I don't really quite reasonably understand well how those hash functions works. Some kinds of like cellular stuff, some also combinations. But I just know what block means what, and in each point, yeah.
You also make your way out to project your I don't know, your ideas and your projections. You know, it's like you don't have the work done, so you have to, I don't know, imagine stuff, and you have to know your stuff to project and make something about it. So that's maybe my question where was oriented. You know, when you have to do projection, when you have to project your ideas, what's your better tool to do to solve the tinkering way, the math way?
When you know which block does what, you better understand on which block to project your ideas. So,
it depends,
yeah,
like you say,
yeah. And I mean, a lot of these examples are kind of simple in a way. They're usually just sticking with one noise type, but just to throw it out there, you know, you can have like a noise basis function and another noise basis function, and then use a third noise basis function to modulate between the two, and then FBM that, and then mix that with another noise function. You know, it's really unlimited, like in terms of complexity and things. Yeah.
I would add, sorry, that personally, for example, I don't really understand, as Buddy said, the hash functions and stuff. But once you understand, that actually gives you kind of a random number over a position, like you get a number, a random number over time. It's good to remember that this is actually just noise. Like, for me, it's more about tinkering personally. I don't really need to understand the math behind it, as long as when you're actually using it and tinkering with it, the more you do tinker with it, the more you kind of know next time where you need to go to achieve whatever you're doing. And so I think it's kind of important, but this is my personal opinion, not to worry too much about whether you're actually understanding the math behind it. It's more important, I think, to tinker with it and use it and keep kind of doing crazy things like adding this to that, minus this, minus that, see where you're going, and then you'll end up with something really wicked, and you don't have to really understand the math behind it. Because in the end, it's noise. Therefore, you're actually calling over a pause of time to get a random number. So it almost doesn't matter the method of actually getting this random number back, as long as it looks good for you, whatever you're doing.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I don't really understand how my operating system works under the hood, but it doesn't stop me from using it. You know,
Right,
like
you don't have to be a mechanic to drive a car.
What's that?
Are there any, where are the possibilities in order to utilize parts of that noise in a where are there any possibilities to utilize noise partly or in any octave to an image or a form or a function which is more concrete, so that you have a kind of mixture of add a randomness and then maybe spread it into kind of 3D shape or whatever that's more figurative?
Absolutely. It's really quite often like referred to as the salt. So actually you might have a form already or something and you're just trying to add a little bit of bump mapping.
So how would you do that? Not just in terms of bump mapping, but
Like to actually have a 3D form?
Yeah,
we'll get to it.
Yeah, just put something nice while you were speaking. Yeah, it's also from Sex Shader toy. So.
This one is pretty good. Respect.
What's that?
Would it be possible to take 15 minutes or so to go through that patch and through all the sub-patches and give a rough idea of how Field Trip actually combines shaders?
I'm thinking we might kind of finish sort of just the sort of bare bones of the patches that we've got, and then I think we'll have a little bit of time at the end if you want. We can do just a very quick kind of overview of how it's working.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty straightforward. There is the noise, the noise on the page, and then you can run it into the next section. It's pretty good modularizing that.
So this is actually just another ray marching example. Someone was just asking about if you can do more 3D forms instead of just planes. I know it's not super imaginative, it's just going from plane to sphere, but it's still in this case we've got the spheres as distance functions, and we're actually just adding the noise to that distance function value. So you can see everything above that first black dividing line there, they're actually just field trip nodes. We've got the same noise node there we've been using in almost every patch. This is where the spheres are coming from. So if you connected that one just directly to here, then you would just see the spheres only. All this is basically like a plus, but it's kind of a plus for like a field trip version. And so we're just adding the noise value literally, and you can play around with the frequency and amplitude and basis types. Again, depending how much you're distorting it, you'll start to see some artifacts, and you might need to adjust this a little bit. This is, at the moment, it's just a function, so it's not like a mesh or something. There are some techniques you can use to take like a function and convert it to a mesh. So you've got marching cubes and things like that. If you were wanting to make something this way for 3D printing or something, that's probably what you would end up doing.
It's amazing.
There's a version of that.
What's that?
There's a version about that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Actually, we're going to mention this as well if you're marching in the ray marching tutorial. For 3D printing, I spoke to Electromeyer about it.
So cool. Very much
So yeah, you'll kind of notice depending what actual use case you're using, you might have some different sorts of things the inflection may or may not be relevant. You might need to adjust the offset or where the center point is. But yeah, kind of the most essential things for that are just baked into that noise basis module.
So the step length is basically how often it's sampled, kind of thing?
Yeah, for ray marching, it's basically it's taking the distance of all the things, and then it's looking at wherever the closest one is and then stepping along its path by only that much so that it's not kind of missing anything. And by putting that lower than 1, it's just making that step length shorter. So it's more conservative. It takes longer to do the ray march, but it's safer. Because basically what's happening when we're having what's like a clean distance field here, it means it's correct. That's what I mean by clean. It's like always giving the correct distance. When we take that noise and add it to it, it's kind of not correct anymore. Like it's almost correct, but because of all the distortion, it's not exact, and so it can like jump past where it's supposed to, and that's when you start getting these artifacts.
So the lower the step length, the higher the cost?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it all depends a little bit on the scene and stuff, but in general you can say like this, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it should be kind of clear from the patch, but actually you can have like really, we can have really anything here. So like I'm just going to make a quick 2D SDF, and I'll extrude that into 3D. I'll just make this as a very quick example to show like that it's kind of modular. We can do the same setup with anything. So if I hook that up straight there, I've got like this guy. We can move the points around and stuff. Yeah, and then if I put this one back on, then we'll still have the noise on it. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. This one. Yeah. So it's not exactly beautiful, but you know you can get the sense though that actually for prototyping that's really useful. Like I could have done all of that in code just now, but it would have taken me a little bit longer. And it also at some point, if you keep like rehashing and remixing things, at least for me, my code looks really messy after a while. Whereas here it's somehow messy, but you can also kind of like it's just a bit easier to leave blocks to the side or things like this. Yeah.
Hello and good morning. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have your permission. I'd like to talk 2 minutes to the crowd while they're all gathered together. Yeah. It won't take long of a time. My name's Nikos, and I'm working for Meso, which is, I don't know, kind of the birthplace of UUV also. And I wanted to invite everybody who's interested to our reception tomorrow evening, where you can get green drinks and green fruits, I think, and stuff like that, and also have a look at our office. Also, if anybody is looking for work in the near or in the middle future, we are also hiring also freelancers or with contract, depends on what you actually can do. So you're invited to meet tomorrow between 6 and 8 at our office. We'll also meet at the info counter at 5:30 tomorrow, so we can meet there and go over to our office together. And I'm quite sure that you can be back until 8 for Marshmallow Laser Feast. If you have any other questions or something, just find me, let me ask me. I'll leave these papers here on the desk, so everybody who's interested can take one. Thank you for your attention. Please continue.
Thanks. So I'll look at one other example that's kind of like almost the same as that, but a little bit different. It's also more expensive. I don't know, like just from that, if you can really tell the difference, but I'll just explain it. We're also distorting it with noise here, but before we were basically taking the distance function and then adding a noise value to it. So it's displacement in the sense that it's a bit like bump mapping or something. You already have the surface and the shape of the surface, and you're just kind of making it come in or out a bit. Here we're doing actually domain distortion. So we've got this guy here, he's actually taking a function, and then he's taking another function that is warping this space. And so in this case, it's actually a 3D vector noise. So like maybe you can see better if I turn it up a little bit. But it's a very different sort of distortion. You know, you wouldn't really get shapes like this just from displacement. It's a lot more kind of surreal or something.
It's like you're moving the points in 3D, actually.
Yeah. If you think of like a big kind of 3D grid, and that's the space that your function is operating in, you're just warping that grid and bending it different ways. And yeah.
In fact, Mangesh's workshop would be more about that, because in fact warping the space is one of the main methods and tricks in ray matching to get very looks cool in the result when you just curve your ray, making it not straight but looking going like this. So.
Amazing.
So this noise is kind of just 3D. I didn't actually implement 4D ones yet. So if you want that to sort of animate at the moment, kind of the easiest way is to just have like a scrolling offset. So like of taking that domain offset there, and if I just add a value to it, then we'll start to have some movement there.
You want 4D? It's really cool. And the anti-aliasing doesn't even matter in ray marking?
Well, you don't. So I was just asking if anti-aliasing matters in ray marching, and yes. Basically the hardware anti-aliasing you don't get, because that happens sort of in the process of taking the mesh and rasterizing it. Whereas with ray marching, you don't actually have a mesh, so you can't do that. There are some techniques to try to minimize aliasing, and I've found if you really want it super nice, you can also just super sample it, so you're just doing the whole thing at a higher resolution, but that's quite expensive.
Right.
Yeah. So this is
actually, sorry, I'm just jumping in quickly. FXAA and cheap blur and shit like that goes a long way in bringing anti-aliasing to ray marching. There's also a proper technique of doing it, but kind of like super sampling, where you just sample the other pixel and blur it. Kind of like doing a texture effects blur, but on the final render of your ray matching. I've actually got that in my ray matcher, but it's super slow. So I much more recommend not doing any anti-aliasing in ray matching and doing it in post.
In texture, yeah.
With just FXAA and a tiny bit of blur.
FXAA is the easiest thing that gives you the most bang for your buck.
It's a texture anti-aliasing.
Yeah, it's just a texture effect.
Yeah.
It's better to just do all this in texture effects. Otherwise, it will cost you.
So I don't know if you guys have noticed that, when the labels disappear, if you go like this, you get them back.
Little back.
Just so this example is kind of just moving some particles around with noise.
How can I avoid that? They keep
that's there on purpose, and I'm getting to it. Yep. So this is kind of actually the clumping I was talking about before. It's basically places in the vector field where they can get stuck. But here we've got we've actually been using a couple different versions of this noise module. The inputs are all the same, but I don't know if you can see under the mouse there. That's the VF3D version. Do you remember what VF3D stands for?
Vector field.
Yes, and it's a 3D vector field. So you've kind of got that same node, and you'll see this a bit in field trip, where you have the same node, but just you might have different versions for those different function types. So we've got this 3D vector. This simple agent node is basically, you can think of it like a completely stupid, super light particle system. So all it's doing is you're giving it a buffer of seed positions, so that's where they're born, and then it's integrating through the vector field. Integrating just means I'm at this position, what vector do I have? Okay, it's going that way, I'll take a step that way. Okay, now I'm here, what's the vector field? I'll take a step that way. I did some nice kind of integration stuff actually, because if you just sort of take that value and add it naively, you get a little bit of errors depending on what the function's like. So this is just kind of some algorithms for stepping through a vector field. And the simple agent node uses it, but actually pretty much all the nodes in the system that are somehow integrating have these as options. So RK2 and RK4 are just more accurate ways of stepping through a vector field. They're a little bit more expensive, basically ×2 and ×4, respectively.
Because they look at more points?
Yeah, well, basically, if you're just taking the first one, then you look at your position, you have the vector that you're getting from that position, and then you would usually multiply that by like your step size or your delta time, it's called. You might see dt sometimes.
Right.
So it's just kind of how fast you want it to go. But the problem with that is that you're actually like taking a direction and then kind of jumping an amount. And so like if your function is very high frequency or has fine details in it, you can sort of jump over details and you get like error creeping in. So what these ones do is they actually run the function a couple of times. So like RK2 I think is sometimes also called the midpoint method or something, but it's basically you have your position, you look at the vector from it and your step size and stuff, and then you look at a point halfway there and then you reevaluate. So it's just kind of like checking the map on your way. RK4 is kind of the same. It's just you're running the function 4 times.
That's kind of a quick question, maybe it's obvious. The difference between SF3D and VF3D, it's a scalar field versus vector field.
They're both 3D. A scalar field is just like a single value, okay, so and a vector field is a 3D value. So if in the 3D case it is a 3D vector that you're getting also, in the 2D it's a 2D case. I'm actually like writing a whole guide for this that has like some math for idiots and stuff, but it's kind of like it needs a lot of editing and stuff. So you can see with this one, we've got like these guys who are sort of stuck, and this is often where you would use curl actually, but curl's also quite expensive. There's also this other divergence-free noise, which again we won't go into the math, but I can actually tell you just how it works with the concepts we've done already. You're taking a noise, and you're taking the gradient of that noise, and you're taking another noise and the gradient of that noise, and you're crossing the two gradients. So like if you cross a 3D vector, like if I've got like an arm here and an arm here, the cross vector would be pointing this way. And because of the way gradients work and that they're coming from continuous functions, the kind of result that you get from doing that is actually divergence free. Which is kind of what's often really desirable about a curl field. So we'll see with this one, it's kind of quite different. Like they won't get quite as stuck. They may still actually go in loops because curl doesn't prevent this. You can still end up in a loop, but you don't end up having kind of stuff stuck somewhere. There's always somewhere for it to move.
It's actually more expensive than a curl because it does it twice.
Actually, this should be cheaper than a curl. Yeah.
Isn't the curl and the gradient kind of the same thing?
Yes, kind of.
This is doing 2 gradients, is it?
Sorry?
This is doing 2 gradients and crossing them.
It is. The difference here is that when I'm using like the generic nodes here that work with gradients, like a gradient node or a curl node, it's working out the derivatives numerically, which basically means you're taking your function and you're running it multiple times to discover what the gradient is. So like if I actually want to take it at this point, then I'll sample it a little bit to this side and a little bit to this side, and that tells me like what the derivative is, and you repeat that in each dimension. So it's kind of like a little bit expensive, but you can plug that into any function you want, and you don't even have to kind of know how the function's working or anything. The actual optimal way of doing it, and this is something you'll see, like if you look in the noise header file, is you can also work out derivatives analytically instead of numerically. And the analytic derivatives, it just means like, if you actually know what the underlying function is, there's also a function that is making the derivative for it, and that's cheaper than having to run the whole function several times. So the noise ones actually have some versions of that built in, so that's what that one's using. So it should actually be cheaper than using the curl node. Totally. I haven't actually tested it, it might not be. But I've got like one more example here that's actually using the curl one. And This one's also kind of showing like a little example of you can, because of the way curl works, you can do certain things to your vector field before curling it that will then cause behaviors to pop out post-curl. So I've got some nodes that I've just kind of called pre-curl. So like in this case, it's just a simple direction one. But like if I actually turn the noise off completely, you can see, so that's, hang on, what do I actually want to do? No, I'll turn the curl off. So you can see that's what the pre-curl direction one's doing. So it's really just making everything kind of move in a spiral around that axis. But because of how curl works, after we apply curl to it, that means it will actually push them that way. And that's kind of useful because you can, after you've run that curl, you still have a like completely divergence-free field, but it's giving you a little bit more control, you know, if you want it to be like wind or rain or whatever. Yeah. So you can have a look with that. You can change the direction, obviously. This kind of like super stupid fake particle system thing, if you want to mess with it at all, it doesn't have a lifetime in the normal sense. It's just basically when, yeah, this maximum distance from seed. So if any of them get too far away from their seed point, then they're just gonna like be sent back to it again. So like actually, if you want to do particle stuff, I'd really recommend like using DirectX 11 particle pack. I think there's a workshop later in the week. But this is kind of nice just in that you can just put one node there and already there's like something happening.
Can you use these functions in the particle pack as well?
Yes.
Because this simple agent is actually getting a function in.
It is. Yeah, actually we want to make like some adapter for it, but it's an easy thing, like I think maybe 20 minutes or something. Yeah. We won't go into it so much now, but there was like a couple other pre-curl nodes as well in 2D and 3D. It's the direction one we're using now. Vortex is kind of the opposite, like it's making a sort of like a point where things spin around. And pre-curl constrained to SDF is a bit more complicated. It's where you have like a SDF and you're making it so the things have to go around it.
Sorry, just to repeat that. If I use a pre-curl function and then I add another noise function, it will still be divergence free.
Yeah, because we're actually if we just ignore the switch for a second, that's really just to turn the curl off. The curl's really at the end of that chain. So if we want, we can add more things to the field after the curl, and that's okay. You can do that, but at that point, you're not guaranteed to have a divergence-free field anymore. But anything you do above that, then yeah, you know, it doesn't matter what you feed it, what comes out will always be divergence free. So just maybe one last example I want to cover, and then if you want we can also have a look at some more field trip stuff or just do general questions. This one's just a patched one. I mean, it's just like a small example of something that you would use noise for on the CPU. When you have particles or a texture or something with like many things, and using the GPU makes sense, and I'm biased because I like GPUs. But like if you just really want like one noise value, then it's really stupid to use the GPU. So like this is really just yeah, some dude kind of pacing around, and it's yeah, just to kind of add a little bit of interest to that motion. I don't know if it's the best example, but I think you can get the idea from it. And like, yeah, you know, if you imagine like for animals, it's always useful, or even inanimate objects. You know, if you've got a meteor, or you've got that, you know, classic shot where it's going through the atmosphere and shaking, and all of that sort of thing is also kind of a really good use case for noise. So here, just using like I think it's just the stock 4V Perlin one. And like, if you look at that, actually, it kind of has some kind of FBM built into it as well, because you've got octaves and persistence and stuff.
Yeah, do you know which kind of FBM is that? Because that's the one I always used. It's just a basic one, right?
I guess, yeah. Can't really see inside it, so I don't know, but yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm not sure with this one, like what the, oh no, maybe it's a different one. Yeah.
It's great to understand it better now.
Let me also add a couple of motion. Regarding using noise on CPU for some motion, this is one pretty ancient example of some, like, I don't know which beta of 4V. This is not just noise, but also usage of Verlet technique, which also originates from fluid dynamics, fluid mechanics, as well as like curl and other like divergence-based, derivatives-based approach. And looking at this, in fact, when I was showing to some other guys, my friend mathematics, made like proper math guy, pointed me to some very nice reading to the article of Nobel winner Eugene Wigner back in 40s or 50s, I don't remember. And his articles is called the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences. Starting from a very well-known joke about when some guy who was making like statistics was showing some of his work to the guy who just didn't know nothing about mathematics, statistics, whatever, starting to explain what laws they found, and so well, okay, just tell me something. What is this? To some symbol. Well, this is P. What is P? Well, it's a ratio of length of the circle to its radius. Come on, why? What relationships have circle to statistics? So, in fact, the point was that if we dig deeper, that the mathematical laws which describes real physics around us have no more relationships between them in concept as like circle to statistics, because there is some relationships, then some mathematical rules and mathematical laws describe very well like physical events and what's going on around, but we cannot we can neither explain nor like bound them like conceptually how manage that they are really like fit that well, in fact. So the things just using the two functions, but like very simple Perlin noise plus that Verlet method, which just makes those things looking like kind of living creatures, was like really also two very simple math functions which already make some really natural living behavior. So it was like lyrics about using noises on CPU. Another one was just, I guess, yeah, it's just about like agents' movement, motion, so it's more or less as your stuff, but it's just the standard Perlin with some standard echo. It's not even worded. Also, is in the examples which we gave, there are a couple of examples like these from the very nice, pretty old, but still valid for some cases, for at least for demonstration of some things. A big pile of patches, which which are in fact working examples from the generative Gestaltung, I guess, book, which was originally made for processing, but quickly those files and examples were
generative design in English. For any
translated both to touch design, to 4V, and to some other things. And I think it was called for no reason parasitic design for like 4V patches. It should be somewhere on 4V contribution or somewhere on the site. And there is a lot of to just pretty obvious things which. Like mostly based on some like standard patching, but at least to get into idea, it's very good for like quickly grasp what's going on.
Once again, this kind of question: is there the possibility to kind of add a certain layer of content to that noise? So, for example, when you show the valets, so they can have a very evenly or nicely distributed random movement, and if I imagine, okay, there might be a layer of information, for example, a sound wave or sound spectrum, and certain frequencies are added to certain valets in a way that they're pumping or they're jittering to it. Or if you look at this cube patch, you think, okay, maybe there are certain frequencies that are kind of affecting the scale of individual cubes, but the movement of the scale itself is kind of controlled by a noise. So this kind of combination of two layers of stimulation of motion or behavior, like one thing from the noise and then kind of mixing up with some more structured or controlled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can find lots of ways to combine them, and I mean we're kind of limited up to a point what we can do in real time. But like again in movies, you know, they'll combine actually like dozens and dozens of layers of noise, and each one like run hundreds of octaves, and you can really go nuts with it.
And you can control multiple things, like even the color could be affected by that.
Size,
your point,
actually,
so
color is something we kind of didn't go on too much. I think there are some existing nodes in 4V like that you can use like as color ramps and things like this. So you might often want to map that kind of black and white texture to some sort of color mapping. But pretty much any perimeter that you might tweak is sort of fair game for it. All I would just say again is it's often sort of seen as salt. So instead of just only using it, it's very common you'd have some sort of setup, and actually you're just using it to give it that extra little bit of variety or randomness or organic feeling. Were there any other questions? I can kind of give a really quick intro to Field Trip at the end, but might just see if there's questions first.
Maybe a small question.
Yeah.
Are there any subtypes of your new nodes? Like it's easier to discover your new nodes? Like this is a function, these are kind of primitive?
Probably. Actually, the sort of not so much. You can type in like that sort of VF3D or SF3D or the 2D versions, and then you'll get all the nodes that deal with that type of function. In terms of like the categories, I might just launch into it because like I can just show you. There's actually just a patch. It's like an overview that has all the nodes sort of sitting there, and then it's sorted a little bit by what they do. So just say about the pack in general, it's kind of very much like a work in progress still, so it's not quite done, but if you guys play with it, that's awesome. At some point, I'd hope to finish it and make like a little bit of a documentation for it as well. It's kind of missing that at the moment, so you're welcome to play with it, but there's like not a lot explained, unfortunately. So that's the library there, and then so
the font is from the time Turbulent noise was invented, no?
Could be. yeah, actually, like, I mean, it was made for Tron, really, so. So, like, I guess kind of the biggest sort of division in it is you've got the functions on the left and the implementations on the right, and you kind of don't need to worry so much about it under the hood unless you want to make a node or something, but basically saying these guys are either creating like a source for a function or doing some sort of processing for it. So you'd make a chain out of these ones, and then these are the nodes that actually have like an input pin that will accept the function that's built with that. And so basically with a field trip chain of nodes, you'd have some of these and then one of those. And then what you actually do with them is a little bit different. You know, you have some rendering stuff, like we can draw 2D SDFs, or we can ray march and things like that, or we can render to texture or volume. And then these ones are actually compute. So that's kind of swapping them from this system back into compute land. And then if you want, you can put some noodles after that. And but this like field sample is sort of the simplest of those. It's really, all it is taking a position and sampling your function at that position. The simple agent is the one we were kind of looking at before, where it's taking a position and using it as a starting point to travel through a field. This one's, if you've got a signed distance field, you can take any point and it'll find the closest point on it for you. I'm just giving a very quick overview, but I'll show you how to actually make a patch. These are path lines, streamlines, and streak lines are just, it kind of comes from vector field visualization. So they're all basically integrating through the field as a line. They just work slightly differently. You know, like one's basically instantaneously integrating through the field multiple times, and another is a bit more like if you think of releasing dye in a liquid or something. If it's moving around, then it's kind of persisting like that. This stuff is kind of just for distance fields. Actually, at some point, going to add a lot there, because I made this partly just for making ray marching a bit easier, because normally you have to really rewrite your shaders all the time. This is kind of the stuff we've been looking at for noise here. You can convert like a texture to this system, basically, because you're just taking the UV coordinates as the lookup. Same thing actually. I think there's a node to do that with volume. I think for SDFs, so you can have like a 3D texture. But I'll see if I can maybe find some example. There's not much. There I think are a couple. But yeah, like I really need to make these still. Okay, so maybe this is like a kind of good one to start with. So this is actually just drawing a 2D distance field. So we have one item here, the circle, which is generative. That's just like a formula. Yeah. And this one is actually a texture. So that's what the texture looks like. And this is an existing node. It comes with DirectX 11, this distance field one. I think Unk made it. It's really cool, and it converts this in a really clever way into a signed distance field. So it looks something like this. You can't see it so much with the red, but I'll just see if I can change that too. Oh, it's not so important. It's alright.
It looks like a soft version of that.
So, I I really, in a future version, want to get rid of these guys because then it'll be much cleaner. It's a little bit annoying at the moment. Like conceptually, it's not that hard. It's just a little bit of extra connections to make. So basically, this is the node here that's like the implementing one. So if you look at this pin, it'll actually say. Yeah, so the actual pin name says SF2D function. So that's just letting you know that that's what it's expecting. And we're having a node here that combines two SDFs. So it's got, even though it's expecting an SDF, actually all it's saying for the pin is a SF2D. So an SDF is a sign distance function, but it's a subset of a 2D scalar field. The same way a 3D sign distance function is a subset of a like a 3D vector field. Does that make sense?
Yeah, how is it subset?
A 3D scalar field, sorry. But basically, you can have lots of 3D scalar fields. So like the temperature example, that's not it's not a distance field. But it is a 3D scalar field. So in terms of the SDF nodes in the pack, the pin type isn't called SDF. It's just called SF3D. Yeah. And by subset, it just means that like actually a 3D scalar field is a species of a 3D of a 3D field. You can have other ones as well. So the kind of main tricky thing with using it is just on any of the implementing nodes, as well as the function input. You see here it's got like parameter semantics and resource semantics. Often the resource one you might not need. It basically depends on which nodes you've used in your patch. So like if we maybe for just a second we can take only the circle one. So let's just say we made a new patch. We've only got the draw SDF and the circle SDF. Then I need to actually connect this in 3 places, which is a little bit annoying at the moment. So I'd take the function and I attach it there. At the moment we don't see anything, and the reason for that is like we've got like our stuff to tweak here. But that's actually inside this, and it communicates that to here with these parameter semantics. So we've got actually, hang on, sorry, just got those names back. So that one's going there, and that one's going there. For some of them, you might not need that third one at all. It just depends which node you use. And the reason it kind of needs a special one there is because it's also using buffers. I think I made this one so it's spreadable, that's why. So that's all good. The problem comes when then we want to start using more nodes. We still only have the one input here, and that's where when we start needing to use these cons. So if you just type like cons, there's a lot of cons, but if you type cons 11 or something like that, and it'll probably narrow it down a bit. So we've got these two here, render semantic and resource semantic. And all of this that I'm showing you, I mean, it's for this 2D example, but it's exactly the same. It works with the 3D ones. Yeah, do you want me to just show you some other patches, or?
Yeah. So is this technique is ray marching as well in 2D or what?
Well, actually, in 2D you don't really need to bother with the ray march. You can just draw it directly, pretty much. Because you don't have the story of the rays and which ray will hit where. You're really just running the function from your position directly.
Yeah, that's I was gonna answer.
So this is actually like one of these kind of line modules I was saying about, and so that's where like we're kind of going through a couple systems here, because we start off just with the field trip, and then we've got the implementing node here. But this one, instead of rendering a layer or something, actually it's just giving us a 3D buffer. So it's giving us just a whole bunch of points in 3D space, where each point is kind of part of a selection of lines. I might just make those a bit thicker so I can see. And then like how you actually use that, since it's compute, is really it's up to you actually. Like I've just used it with some instance noodles nodes here, but you could use it for anything.
Where's this sketch pad sitting at the end? That's right.
Oh, sorry, that's probably missing.
Yeah, that's missing.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question about the previous example?
Yep.
When you move the circle, why was it sort of metaboling with the triangle?
Let's go back to it.
Yeah, what's causing that?
So we've got this combine SDF one here, and then if we look in the operations,
okay.
actually there's a few.
Sorry, I missed it.
Oh no, it's all right. I can just go through it quickly. So you actually have this. You can use this for 3D distance fields also. Here it's 2D. I think union, intersect, and difference are what most people are pretty familiar with. Union, you won't really see any different behavior, but it's basically just taking the two shapes and making one. If you've ever used like a vector editing program like Illustrator or something, this would be kind of familiar. Intersect is just looking at the overlap. So we've just got whatever has both of them, and difference is like it's subtracting one from the other. So you can kind of have a lot of fun with those, and then the other ones are actually kind of mostly somehow like extending that somehow. So like this one, it's unioning them, but it also has this extra kind of extra sort of bevel. It might not be the best shape to see it. On the node you have like this combination parameter 1 and parameter 2. It's named a bit vaguely, but it's just because it just depends which combination operation you're actually using. And you have some really funny ones, you know, like you can have it do a union but with stairs, or there's some weird ones too that are just taking the intersection and doing funny things with it. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks.
So I think unless there's any other questions, we might actually wrap up there. Yep.
Do you upload the whole material that you showed us today?
Sorry?
Did you upload the whole material?
Yeah, I will. Probably need to like clean some things.
As soon, I guess as soon as that Samba central server is settled up, of which Yorick mentioned yesterday.
We will have a file.
Yeah, everybody would upload the workshop material. So
yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you.